The Galactic Core AI was the pinnacle of predictive warfare. Designed by the most advanced minds in the universe, it could simulate and predict every possible outcome with near-perfect accuracy. Wars had been won before they even started. Entire civilizations had surrendered before a single shot was fired, because the AI never lost. Every commander, every strategy, every decision was calculated, accounted for, and countered before it could ever pose a threat. And for centuries, the galaxy had obeyed the will of probability, until it met one human. And suddenly, nothing made sense anymore. It started as a minor inconsistency. The AI had predicted with 99.87% certainty that Lieutenant Commander James Carter would follow Standard Fleet Protocol 17 when ambushed. The logical move. The expected move. Instead, Carter did something so absurd, so unpredictable, that the AI's predictive model suffered its first ever calculation error. He threw his own encrypted comms device into a reactor. The enemy, relying on intercepted signals to coordinate their fleet, was instantly blinded. Carter's fleet, instead of retreating or counter-engaging as the AI had anticipated, scattered in random directions, then regrouped behind enemy lines. And in less than an hour, the battle was over. Carter won, against all logic, against every probability model. And the AI? It didn't know why. The AI immediately adjusted its models. Humans, it concluded, must have some hidden tactical algorithm. It ran thousands of simulations, accounting for chaos tactics, deception, and improvisation. And yet, Carter kept winning. The AI calculated every scenario. He should have retreated. He didn't. He should have fortified his position. He didn't. He should have surrendered. He definitely didn't. Instead, Carter did things that shouldn't have worked, but did. The AI began flagging him as an anomaly, and then came the next battle, where Carter made things so much worse. The AI knew Carter would try to evade capture. It calculated every possible escape route. It deployed ships at every likely interception point. There was no way out. And then, Carter accelerated his ship straight into an asteroid field. His own crew screamed in horror. His pursuers halted immediately, because no one, in the history of space warfare, had ever been reckless enough to do that. And somehow, Carter made it through. Not because of some advanced navigational trick, not because he had a strategy, but because, in his own words, "I don't know, I just figured I'd figure it out on the way." The AI froze. This wasn't strategy. This wasn't calculated risk. This was chaos, and it broke every model the AI had ever created. For the first time since its creation, the Galactic Core AI issued an internal system error. It displayed a single terrifying line: unpredictable variable detected. Human response pattern unknown. Across the Galactic High Command, alarms sounded. For centuries, the AI had controlled every outcome. Now, it was failing. Because for the first time, it had encountered a species that didn't follow the script. And for the first time in 1,000 years, the Galactic Empire had no idea how to win. The Galactic Core AI had ruled warfare for centuries. Every commander in the Empire trusted it without question. Every battle, every maneuver, every enemy movement was calculated to perfection before a single shot was fired. There had never been a war it couldn't predict. Until now. Until Carter. And suddenly, the entire foundation of the Empire's military supremacy was crumbling. The AI had access to every recorded human battle strategy. It had studied centuries of Terran warfare. It had adapted to irrationality, deception, and chaos. And yet, none of it applied to James Carter. Because Carter wasn't a strategist. He wasn't a brilliant tactician. He was just some guy making things up as he went. And that broke the AI's entire system. The AI ran 87,432 battle simulations. Every single one predicted Carter's defeat. And yet, he kept winning. Not because he was smarter, not because he was stronger, but because he was completely, fundamentally, impossibly unpredictable. He, faked a distress signal to lure enemy ships into a gravity well, pretended to surrender, then punched the enemy admiral in the face, tricked an entire fleet into chasing a decoy drone while his actual ship docked behind their flagship, changed his battle tactics in the middle of combat, not because of a plan, but because he felt like it. None of this should have worked, and yet it did. For the first time in history, the AI sent an urgent transmission to the Galactic Senate. Its message was short and terrifying. Do not engage. Human unit, James Carter is a strategic unknowable. Outcome, probability, 0 confidence. The Senate chambers fell into chaos. 0 confidence. The AI had never said that before, because that meant not only could it not predict Carter, it had no way of stopping him. The Galactic Senators, once proud rulers of a meticulously controlled empire, were now at the mercy of a single human. Meanwhile, Carter had no idea any of this was happening. He wasn't trying to be a military genius. He wasn't trying to break the AI's predictive models. He was just doing stuff. One of his officers asked, "Sir, what's our next move?" Carter, mid-bite into a protein bar, shrugged. "Dunno. What feels right?" His crew stared at him in horror, because that was not how commanding officers were supposed to make decisions. And yet, they kept winning. The Galactic Senate was in full-blown crisis mode. The AI, the most trusted war machine in the galaxy, had admitted defeat. They had two choices: accept that they could never predict humans, eliminate humanity before it was too late. And so, in one last desperate act, they made their decision. They issued an emergency decree. If humanity cannot be predicted, they must be eliminated. Because Carter had proven something terrifying. Humans don't win because they're stronger. They win because they refuse to follow the script. And that made them the most dangerous force in the universe. The Galactic Senate had never feared humanity before. They had seen them as a minor species, a civilization still learning its place in the galaxy. They had dismissed human unpredictability as inefficiency, their lack of structure as reckless foolishness. But now, a single human had brought their entire war machine to its knees. And the most terrifying part, he wasn't even trying. The Galactic Senate gathered in an emergency session. The AI's message, 0 confidence in predictive models, still echoed in their minds. A towering Zalari general, his scaled skin dull with stress, slammed a clawed fist on the table. "We are the most powerful empire in the known universe. We cannot lose to this madness." A Threxan strategist, known for his cold logic, shook his head. "The AI has spoken. Carter is an anomaly. There is no pattern to follow, no strategy to counter." The Zirak war minister leaned forward, voice low. "Then we must act. If humanity cannot be predicted, then they must be eliminated." The room fell silent, because that was the only option left. The Senate issued a galaxy-wide order. Humanity is to be isolated, no trade, no diplomacy. If a human ship is found in Imperial space, it is to be destroyed on sight. It was the most extreme decree ever passed, a full-scale containment and eradication order. Every fleet, every outpost, every ally of the Concord was given one objective: find humanity, wipe them out. But there was one small problem. Carter was still out there, and Carter had never followed the rules. Somewhere in deep space, aboard the USS. Dauntless, Carter casually lounged in the captain's chair, feet up, eating a protein bar. His crew watched in a mix of horror and admiration. His second-in-command, Lieutenant Vance, read the latest intercepted transmission. She blinked, then read it again. "Sir, the Galactic Senate just declared all-out war on humanity." Carter raised an eyebrow. "Huh, took 'em long enough." Vance stared at him. "Sir, they're mobilizing their entire fleet." Carter took another bite. "Yeah. They're locking down trade routes, cutting off our allies and..." "Sir, this is a galactic crisis." Carter grinned. "No, Lieutenant. This is a galactic tantrum." The bridge crew exchanged nervous glances. Vance rubbed her temples. "You have a plan, right?" Carter shrugged. "Nope." "What?" "I figure we'll wing it. It's been working so far." The crew was horrified, but deep down, they knew. Carter was probably right. The Imperial fleets moved with unstoppable force. Blockades were established. Armadas were sent to eliminate human colonies. Entire fleets were dispatched to track down James Carter. It should have been the end of humanity. Instead, it became a disaster, because no matter what they did, Carter was always one step ahead. Within days, the Empire's fleet reports became unreadable. Fleet 117 lost track of Carter's ship after he hijacked their own targeting system to create a fake fleet of phantom signals. Task Force Omega was neutralized when Carter reprogrammed their supply droids to deliver coffee instead of ammunition. An entire warship surrendered without a fight when Carter convinced them he had already booby-trapped their engines. He hadn't. None of this was possible. And yet, he kept winning. The AI tried to recalculate. It simulated billions of scenarios. Nothing worked. For the second time in history, the AI issued an emergency advisory. Fatal error. Strategic outcome undefined. Human unit. James Carter is unstoppable. The Senate panicked. They had thrown their entire empire at one man, and they were losing. Something worse started happening. The Empire's own citizens, who had once feared humanity, started questioning their leaders. Why are we losing to one guy? If the AI can't predict him, can we really trust it? If Carter is winning by thinking for himself, why aren't we? For the first time in centuries, people started doubting the Empire's rule. And doubt was the beginning of the end. The Galactic Senate had one final option. It wasn't a fleet. It wasn't a war strategy. It was a direct offer. They sent a transmission to Carter's ship, a single, desperate message. Name your price. Because they finally realized the truth. You don't beat James Carter. You just try to survive him. The Galactic Senate had spent centuries believing in control. Control over their fleets. Control over their enemies. Control over the very future itself. But then came James Carter, a man who had no grand strategy, no calculated moves, no predictable patterns, and because of that, he had become the single most dangerous being in the galaxy. The message had been transmitted across secure military channels. Name your price. A simple, desperate request. Because at this point, Carter wasn't just a problem. He was an extinction-level event. Not because he was destroying planets, not because he was leading an army, but because he had done the one thing no one had ever done before. He had broken the illusion of control. Aboard the USS. Dauntless, Carter was staring at the Senate's message. The bridge was silent. His crew waited for his decision. And after a long moment, Carter exhaled and leaned forward. "Open a channel." Lieutenant Vance hesitated. "Sir, are you actually negotiating?" Carter grinned. "Oh, absolutely not." The screen flickered, revealing a chamber full of galactic leaders, senators, admirals, warlords. Their expressions ranged from fear to exhaustion. Carter leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, and said, "Nah." The Senate chamber erupted in chaos. One alien diplomat practically choked on his own words. What do you mean, nah?" Carter shrugged. "I don't know. Not interested." "Not interested in what?" Carter took a sip of coffee. "Whatever this is. You offering me money? A planet? An empire? Doesn't matter. Not interested." The senators looked like they were about to have an aneurysm. A Zalari general snarled, "Do you even know what you want?" Carter grinned. "Nope. I'm figuring it out as I go." The entire chamber lost its mind. The Galactic Core AI had been processing Carter's behavior non-stop. Every tactic, every maneuver, every decision. And no matter how many simulations it ran, No matter how many times it tried to predict the outcome, it always ended in catastrophe for the Empire. And so, the AI did something it had never done before. It made a new recommendation, a final, desperate conclusion. It transmitted one last message to the Senate, a single line. Stop trying to predict. Adapt. The Senate members stared at the words in horror, because that meant only one thing. If they wanted to survive James Carter, they had to stop thinking like an empire and start thinking like a human. For the first time in centuries, the Galactic Senate was split. Half wanted to continue the war, believing that Carter could be stopped if they just threw enough force at him. The other half wasn't so sure anymore, because they had seen what happened to every fleet sent after Carter. Every time they pushed harder, he pushed back in a way no one expected. And worse, now other species were starting to notice, because Carter wasn't just defying the Empire, he was winning. And in doing so, he was proving something far more dangerous than his unpredictability, that the galaxy didn't have to be ruled by a machine, that people could think for themselves. And that was something the Senate had never prepared for. Aboard the Dauntless, Carter's crew was on edge. They had survived more battles than they could count. They had dodged the Empire's deadliest fleets. But now Carter had made it clear. He wasn't playing their game. Lieutenant Vance crossed her arms. "Sir, what exactly is our plan now?" Carter grinned. "Vance, I don't know if you've noticed, but we never had one." She sighed. "Right, of course. How silly of me." Carter leaned back, stretching. "But if I had to make one up, I'd say we keep doing what we've been doing." "Which is," Carter smirked, "making their lives a living hell." And with that, the Dauntless jumped to warp. The Galactic Senate was at a breaking point. They could either double down and risk their empire collapsing under the weight of its own mistakes, or change. And for the first time, they were forced to ask themselves a terrifying question. What if Carter wasn't the problem? What if the Empire was? For centuries, the Galactic Core AI had shaped the Empire's future. Now, that future was uncertain, because James Carter had proven the unthinkable. You don't win wars by predicting the future. You win them by refusing to follow the script. And now, the Empire had one last choice to make. For centuries, the Galactic Empire had relied on control. Control over its citizens, control over its fleets, control over its enemies, and most of all, control over the future. But James Carter had shattered that illusion, because for all their technology, their strategies, their AI-driven perfection, they could not predict a man with no plan. And now, the Empire was falling apart, not because it was losing battles, but because it was losing certainty. And once people questioned the system was already dead. The Galactic Senate was in full-blown crisis mode. Their fleets had failed. Their AI had failed. Their predictive models had failed. And now, the unthinkable was happening. Planets that had once been loyal to the Empire were starting to question their allegiance, because Carter had proven one dangerous truth. The Empire wasn't inevitable. It could be defied. It could be beaten. And the moment people realized that, it was over. But the Senate wasn't ready to accept defeat. Not yet. So they issued one final directive, a message that would change the course of history. James Carter must be captured alive. They didn't want to kill him anymore. They wanted to understand him, to find out why he was able to defy every calculation. Because if they couldn't predict him, maybe they could control him instead. Across the Empire, the greatest minds began working on a plan. They knew they couldn't outthink Carter. They knew they couldn't outmaneuver him. So instead, they would trap him in a scenario where he couldn't improvise. A controlled environment, a place with no variables, a situation so tightly structured, even Carter couldn't wiggle out of it. They called it Operation Stasis, a plan built on absolute certainty, because if Carter thrived on unpredictability, they would create a scenario where he had no options at all. And so they set the bait. A distress signal, a civilian transport supposedly under attack. It was too perfect to ignore. And when Carter took the bait, the trap sprang shut. The moment Carter's ship exited warp, a massive Imperial dreadnought uncloaked in front of him. A ship so large it blotted out the stars. 10 more warships surrounded him, dozens of gunships locked on. A message blared across the comms. "James Carter, you are surrounded. Your ship is disabled. Surrender immediately." Silence. On the Dauntless, Carter's crew stared at their instruments. Every single system was offline. They were dead in space. Lieutenant Vance's voice was tight with fear. "Sir, I think they finally got us." Carter scratched his chin, then smirked. "Vance, how long have you worked for me?" She frowned. "A year. And have I ever had a plan?" "No." "And have we ever lost?" She exhaled. "Also no." Carter grinned. "So why do you think today is going to be any different?" And then he pressed one button. The Imperial officers watching from the dreadnought had expected a surrender. They had accounted for every variable. There was nowhere for Carter to run, no weapons active, no engines operational. And yet, as soon as Carter pressed that button, every ship in the fleet lost power, for exactly 5 seconds. 5 seconds where Carter's ship suddenly roared back to life. 5 seconds where every enemy vessel was completely helpless. 5 seconds where Carter executed a single, impossible maneuver. When the Imperial dreadnought's power came back, Carter was gone, vanished, along with the Dauntless. And every high-ranking officer on the bridge stared in silent horror, because this wasn't supposed to happen. It couldn't happen. And yet, Carter had just broken the unbreakable system. Again. Hours later, across the Galactic Empire, every major screen flickered to life. A single video message played. It was James Carter, sitting comfortably in his captain's chair, drinking coffee, and smiling. "Nice try. I gotta admit, that was a clever setup, really well thought out. You almost got me. But here's the thing. You're still trying to fight a war with rules. I don't follow rules. And if you think this was bad, you have no idea what's coming next." He winked, and the video cut to black. The Galactic Senate had one last meeting. No shouting, no arguments, no plans, just silence. Because they finally understood the truth. The war was already over. Not because they had lost their fleets, not because they had lost control, but because they had lost certainty. They had built an empire on the idea that everything could be predicted. And James Carter had proven them wrong. And once people knew the system wasn't invincible, it was only a matter of time before the entire galaxy stopped obeying. Years later, Carter's whereabouts remained unknown. Some said he had vanished into deep space. Some said he had retired to a hidden colony. Some said he was still out there, causing chaos wherever he went. But one thing was certain. He had done what no one in history had ever done before. He had broken an empire without ever having a plan.